5 coyotes closed in, and the bobcat's scream vanished into the trees. A lone baby bobcat trembled as 5 coyotes tightened their circle, the forest holding its breath around him. No mother answered. No shadows moved, until a ranger heard a cry that wasn't meant to reach human ears. What she discovered didn't just save the kit. It revealed something the wild had been hiding all along. Dawn had barely touched the kaibab forest when the silence broke, not with birdsong, not with wind, but with the thin, cracking cry of something too young to understand fear and too alone to survive it. A baby bobcat, no bigger than a house cat and still soft around the ears, staggered across the pine needles. Its paws slipped on the cold, dew-soaked ground as it tried to back away from the 5 coyotes closing in around it. They formed a ring, imperfect, shifting, but deliberate. None of them lunged, none rushed. They simply stepped in, then stopped, then stepped again, tightening the circle like dusk closing over a dying fire. Their tails hung low, their shoulders rolled with that easy, calculating patience coyotes were known for when they understood a meal was already theirs. The bobcat's sides expanded and collapsed too fast, its breath a tremor instead of a rhythm. It backed up until its haunches hit a fallen limb, then let out another broken wail, thin, high, desperate. It wasn't a warning. It was a plea. And the forest, still half asleep, gave nothing back. No answering growl, no rustle of a mother returning. Only the quiet crunch of paws on needles as the coyotes tightened their stance. The largest one, a scarred male with a winter-thin coat, lowered his head and sniffed the air. He could smell weakness. He could smell hunger, too. Not his own, but the kind that oozed from animals abandoned too long. The bobcat kit tried to stand taller, arching its back, letting out a miniature hiss that sounded like air leaking through a cracked reed. It fooled no one. The coyotes didn't even flinch. The morning sun filtered through the pines in pale, streaked light, striping the ground with gold that made the dust glow. Every time the kit tried to turn, its paws slipped, as if the forest itself refused to give it footing. It spun in a small, unsteady circle, trying to guard all angles at once. Its ears were pinned flat, barely visible against its head, and its tail kept twitching in frantic, frightened jerks. One of the younger coyotes crept forward, its nose brushing the air inches from the kit's back leg. It didn't bite. It simply tested, measured, then stepped away again. Another coyote mirrored the movement on the opposite side, pacing in a slow arc, as if studying the kit's weakening balance. They were writing the ending before it happened, each one adding a quiet line to the same grim conclusion. The kit let out another cry, but the sound was losing strength. It was the kind of cry that had stopped carrying hope minutes ago, thin, breaking, full of the dawning realization that nothing familiar was coming. No heavy footfalls, no comforting scent, no warm shape stepping between it and death. Just the pine wind, drifting through the trees indifferent to what lived or died beneath them. The coyotes edged closer, 5 shadows moving with eerie unity. Their paws barely disturbed the forest floor. Even their breathing felt controlled. The only sign of their intent was the narrowing distance, 3 feet, then 2.5, then 2. The bobcat kit stumbled, its back leg buckling slightly before it caught itself. The motion exposed its belly for a heartbeat, and the scarred male lifted his head, tracking the motion with cold precision. Another step, another circle tightening. They could wait as long as needed. The forest would keep their secret. No rush, no waste. The kit tried one last time, lifting its tiny chin and letting out a strained squeal that echoed up into the branches, a final call thrown into a world that had already turned away. But the cry faded fast, swallowed by the pines, and the silence that followed felt like the forest itself exhaling, accepting what was about to happen. The coyotes crept in, slow as dusk settling over stone. Nothing moved to stop them. Nothing answered the cry. Nothing yet. Miles away, Ranger Brooke Harris was guiding her Jeep down a narrow fire road, one hand on the wheel, the other adjusting the old radio clipped to her vest. The morning was quiet in a way that usually meant peace, but today the quiet felt heavier, as if the forest was holding its breath. She'd spent enough years in uniform, first in the Army, then in wildlife service, to know that silence could mean trouble long before her mind caught up to the instinct. She slowed the Jeep as the path narrowed beneath low branches. Dust rose behind her in a long, lazy cloud. Her thermos rattled in the cup holder. She took a sip of coffee, lukewarm but strong, and let her eyes follow the shifting shadows between the pines. Sunlight filtered through the needles in thin shafts, painting the forest floor in gold. It should have been beautiful. It should have been ordinary, but something felt wrong. A tension she couldn't name. Then she heard it. A sound so sharp it sliced through the air. Thin, high, broken. A sound that didn't belong anywhere near a peaceful morning. Brooke's spine straightened before her brain even registered what she'd heard. She lifted her foot off the gas, letting the Jeep crawl forward until she could isolate the direction. Another cry. This one shorter, frayed at the end, like someone pulling a string tight until it snapped. Brooke braked hard. "No," she whispered, because she knew that sound. She'd heard versions of it overseas, from injured animals caught in crossfire, from frightened strays trapped after bombings. It wasn't just fear. It was the sound of life trying not to slip away. She threw the Jeep into park and swung out, boots crunching on gravel. The forest felt suddenly alive again. Birds startled from branches, the wind threading through the needles, a distant woodpecker tapping at bark. But Brooke only listened for one thing. The cry came again, closer this time. Brooke grabbed her flare gun and slung it across her back. She took her flashlight too, though she knew she wouldn't need it at this hour. Habit. Preparation was all she could control when the unknown was calling. She pushed into the trees, stepping over roots and ducking under low branches. The scent of pine sap hung thick in the cool air. A light breeze stirred the forest, but the unease in her chest didn't lift. Each step seemed to draw her toward a center she couldn't see. As she moved deeper, her boot landed on something soft, pine needles pressed flat. Then another patch, disturbed, as if something had skidded or stumbled through. She crouched, tracing the small drag marks with her fingertips. Whatever left them was lightweight and young. She followed the signs instinctively, weaving around a cluster of oak shrubs. The cry came again, louder now. Brooke didn't think. She ran. Branches slapped at her arms, snagged at her shirt, but she kept moving until the trees parted into a small clearing. Sunlight hit the exposed dirt in a soft gold wash. At first she saw nothing unusual, just the same trunks, the same sloping hill, the same quiet shimmer of heat on the ground. But then her eyes caught the shape in the corner of the clearing. A tiny bobcat kit, barely able to stand. Its sides heaved as it tried to back away from the 5 coyotes hemming it in. Brooke's pulse punched through her chest. She didn't hesitate. She darted back toward the trees, sprinting for the Jeep. Pine needles sprayed under her feet as she reached the driver's side, yanked the door open, and turned the key. The engine roared, a hard, familiar sound that cut through the forest like a lifeline. She hit the accelerator so fast, the tires spat dirt behind her. The Jeep burst through the tree line and into the clearing, sunlight blazing across the windshield. She angled the front bumper toward the coyotes, leaning on the horn. The sharp blare jolted the pack. They flinched, scattering to the edges, but not fleeing completely. Coyotes were many things. Smart, persistent, unafraid of waiting. Brooke slammed the Jeep to a stop and jumped out, flare gun in hand. She fired a blast straight up. The flare cracked with a violent pop, igniting into a streak of red that ripped across the morning sky before settling in smoking fragments. Light washed the clearing in a brief, eerie glow. The coyotes retreated another few yards. Still watching. Still waiting. Brooke approached the kit slowly. It wobbled, legs trembling, but did not try to run. Instead, it limped toward her. Tiny, exhausted, the faintest line of blood trailing from its rear leg. When it reached her boot, it pressed its small head against the leather, as if anchoring itself to the only safe thing left in its world. Brooke knelt carefully, her voice dropping into the same low, steady tone she'd used on injured soldiers and frightened animals alike. "You're okay," she murmured. "I've got you now." The kit let out a small, broken sound, somewhere between a mewl and a sigh, and leaned its weight against her shin. Brooke felt the tremor running through its little body, a vibration of fear so deep it made her throat tighten. She looked toward the tree line again. The coyotes lingered like shadows, silent and patient. Their yellow eyes caught the sun, flickering in the underbrush. They had not given up. They had simply shifted their distance, letting her think she'd won the moment. Brooke swept her gaze across the clearing. No large tracks, no fresh blood, no bobcat adult hidden nearby. No snapped branches showing a mother had fought here. The absence was louder than the cry had been. Bobcats did not abandon their young. Something had gone terribly wrong. Brooke reached for her radio, keeping the flare gun pointed toward the shadows. "Base, this is Harris," she said, her voice steady even though adrenaline still pulsed hot under her skin. "I've got a lone bobcat kit under pressure. No sign of the mother. I need backup as soon as possible." Static crackled before the dispatcher answered. "Harris, the vet team is tied up on a call. Closest support is at least an hour out. Road conditions are rough." Brooke exhaled slowly. She looked down at the kit, which gazed up with wide, terrified eyes, its small body pressed against her leg as if she were the last solid thing in its unraveling world. "All right," she whispered. "Then we'll manage until they get here." The forest rustled softly behind her. A low, throaty yip drifted from the brush, too close. Brooke didn't turn. She simply shifted her stance, putting her body between the kit and the sound. Nothing answered the cry, but Brooke had, and she wasn't leaving. The kit pressed itself tighter against her boot, trembling so hard she could feel the vibration through the leather. Its breath came in tiny, panicked bursts, each one making its sides flutter like thin wings trying to hold on to life. Brooke steadied her hand on the flare gun, scanning the tree line without turning her body. Movement flickered in the shadows. Low, deliberate, patient. The coyotes hadn't given up. They had simply adjusted, slipping back into that eerie stillness predators used when time was working in their favor. Brooke inhaled slowly. She knew the way fear traveled through young animals, how it could seize their tiny bodies until their legs buckled under them. She lowered herself to one knee and reached out a hand, palm up, letting the kit decide. For a moment, the bobcat froze, its ears pulled flat against its skull. Then, with a soft, broken sound, it nudged its head into her palm as if recognizing something safer than the dark edges circling around them. "That's it," Brooke whispered. "Easy, little one." The kit closed its eyes and leaned its small weight against her hand. Brooke felt her chest tighten with something she hadn't expected, a quiet urgency, a sharp, protective instinct that pulled up memories she usually kept packed away. The field clinics overseas, the nights listening for sounds in the dark that could decide who would live until dawn, the young ones she'd tried to carry out when everything went wrong. She took one slow breath, grounding herself. The coyotes shifted again, a crunch of needles, a soft pad of paws, a low, throaty whine that carried a message Brooke had heard before. "We're still here. We haven't forgotten." She rose carefully, keeping the kit close to her boot. "I need you with me," she murmured to it. "Stay right here. No running off." The kit didn't run. It simply stayed pressed at her heel like it had decided she was the only thing in this forest not meant to kill it. Brooke lifted her flare gun and fired into the ground a few yards in front of the largest coyote. The flare hit with a violent hiss, bursting into a bloom of red sparks that spat and crackled across the dirt. The coyote jerked back, startled, ears twitching sharply. Another flare's dying embers hissed in the pine needles. The pack retreated, but only far enough to stay out of immediate reach. They circled, spreading along the shadows like a shifting wall. Brooke knew this tactic. They wanted her to think she had space. They wanted her to move the wrong way, give them the chance to collapse the circle again. "You're not getting him," she said quietly, as if they could understand. In a way they could. She backed toward the jeep, step by controlled step, keeping her front toward the predators. The kit stayed glued to her calf, stumbling at times, but never letting distance open between them. When she reached the jeep, she opened the passenger door and scooped the bobcat into her arms. It weighed nearly nothing, a flutter of ribs and fur and fear. She settled it on the seat, where it immediately crouched low, eyes huge, still staring toward the tree line as though expecting the coyotes to materialize through the glass. Brooke shut the door gently and leaned against it for a moment, letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The forest felt different now, charged with the tension that comes when one moment of safety might be the last. She opened the driver's door and climbed in, keeping her eyes on the tree line. The coyotes were shadows again, half hidden behind brush and pine trunks, heads low, watching the jeep with a stillness that made the air feel brittle. Brooke reached over and touched the kit lightly on its back. The tiny body stiffened at first, then settled as it recognized the same steady presence as before. Its breathing slowed a little, though the tremor in its limbs remained. "You're safe for now," she said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Coyotes could be reckless when hunger stretched too long, but they could also be strategic, and the way they held back now told her they weren't done. Brooke gripped the wheel. "We need to find your mom." She eased the jeep forward, moving slowly so she could scan the ground. Signs of a struggle would show: disturbed earth, broken twigs, drag marks, maybe even blood. But the clearing was surprisingly clean. Too clean. As if whatever happened had happened elsewhere, or someone had taken care to leave no trace. The kit lifted its head suddenly, letting out a soft, questioning mewl. It stood on shaky paws and pressed its face against the window, staring at the pines rushing by. Brooke followed its gaze and caught a glimpse of movement, just one coyote pacing them at a distance, slipping between trees like smoke. Then another, and another. They were trailing them. Brooke felt the old knot tighten between her ribs. "They're not giving up, are they?" The kit responded with a small, frightened chirp. She kept driving until the road widened enough to pull over. She stepped out and crouched near the ground, scanning for prints. Nothing fresh, nothing deep. She moved farther down the slope until she found a patch of soft dirt. There. Something had moved through here fast. Claw marks. A bobcat adult's stride. But the pattern felt wrong. Too long in some places, too short in others. A sprint interrupted by something unexpected. Brooke followed the marks a few feet farther before they disappeared into tangled brush. She pushed the branches aside, careful not to make noise that might alert the coyotes still trailing them. The kit stayed close, tiny paws crunching softly on the dry soil. It stopped suddenly and let out a small whimper. Brooke froze. The forest had gone unnervingly silent. No birds, no insects, just the faint sound of something large settling into place far behind them. "Easy," she whispered. A low growl rumbled from the brush. Not coyote. Deeper. From the kit? No. The kit was rigid, eyes wide, staring past Brooke. Brooke followed its gaze and saw the shadow slip between trees again. Coyotes. 3 of them this time. They stood in a loose triangle, their heads lowered, tails stiff, eyes fixed on the kit. They had figured out her path, and they planned to cut her off. Brooke pulled the kit close with one arm and backed toward the jeep. The coyotes didn't move. They didn't have to. The message was clear. Keep going the wrong way. We'll wait. Brooke opened the passenger door and slid the kit inside again. She took a moment to gather her breath. Her pulse pounded in her ears, but her hands stayed steady. Okay, she murmured. You're not taking him, and you're not leading us anywhere we don't choose to go. She slid back into the driver's seat. The kit pressed against her leg this time, no longer hiding in the corner of the seat. Its trembling had changed. Not just fear now, but a need for contact, for something solid. Brooke rested her hand lightly over its back. We'll find her, she promised. Whatever happened, we'll find her. She started the jeep again, the engine rumbling softly in the clearing. Outside, the coyotes watched her. Inside, the little bobcat watched only her, and Brooke drove on, straight into a forest full of questions the morning sun wasn't ready to answer. The forest grew denser as she left the clearing behind. The jeep's tires rolled over uneven ground, sending soft rattles through the cabin. Every few moments, the kit would flinch at a sudden bump or the snap of a distant branch, its wide eyes lifting to Brooke's face as if to make sure she hadn't disappeared. Its trust was fragile, trembling like a thread stretched thin between terror and the faint memory of safety. Brooke slowed the jeep to a crawl. The shadows between the pines thickened, stretching long fingers across the path. She kept glancing from the road to the kit and back again, noting each shift of its ears, each shallow breath. Young as it was, it felt the tension in a way that only wild creatures did, reading the forest not by sight alone, but by the invisible things humans often missed. She pulled over near a thicket where the underbrush thinned enough for signs to show. If the mother had passed through here, the forest would have recorded that story. Bent grass, turned soil, claw marks, a broken twig. Bobcats left traces without meaning to. Panic left even more. Brooke stepped out, her boots sinking into the soft humus. The scent of pine resin was warm and sharp, mixing with the faint musk of wild animals. She scanned the brush, lowering herself into a crouch as she sifted the dirt with careful fingers. Nothing fresh. A few squirrel tracks, deer prints from the previous night. No blood, no tufts of fur, no drag marks, no sign of a fight. Where were you headed? She murmured to the forest. Behind her, the kit peered out the open door of the jeep, its front paws planted on the edge as though its small body couldn't decide between staying hidden and following her. When Brooke turned her head, it chirped, a soft, worried sound, and hopped down. It limped toward her, placing each paw like it wasn't sure the ground would hold. Brooke let it settle beside her leg before she moved deeper into the trees. She swept her gaze across the space in wide arcs, looking for anything that broke the quiet pattern of the forest. The morning light caught on something, a patch of flattened pine needles. She stepped closer. The indentations were odd, too shallow for a deer, too wide for a fox, and too uneven for a healthy bobcat. But the shape wasn't clear. It wasn't enough. She moved farther, tracing the faint hints of disturbance like following whispers. The kit let out another cry, weaker than the ones before. It pressed closer to her, brushing its tiny head against her calf, asking a question it couldn't shape. Brooke rested a hand lightly on its back. I know, she said. You're wondering where she is, too. A gust of wind stirred the trees. The branches shivered overhead, sending a small rain of dry needles to the forest floor. Something about that simple sound made the silence afterward feel even heavier. Brooke exhaled slowly. Every instinct she had told her the mother wouldn't have abandoned her kit voluntarily. The absence here wasn't natural. It radiated wrongness like a cold draft from a doorway left open in winter. She straightened and walked several yards deeper into the trees. The kit struggled to keep up, but it didn't let her out of its sight. When she stopped, it reached her boot and leaned against it again, taking strength from the contact. Brooke wanted to lift it, hold it against her chest to ease its trembling, but the forest demanded her attention. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened. No answering cry from an adult bobcat. No rustle of something large moving nearby. Only distant branches creaking, like old bones shifting. The wrongness whispered again. Brooke reached for her radio. "Base, this is Harris," she said. "Still no sign of the mother. I'm about half a mile north of the initial clearing. No blood trails, no drag marks. Nothing that explains why this kit is alone." The dispatcher's voice crackled back, laced with static. "Understood. Vet team is still delayed. Weather caused some washouts near the main trail." "Copy." She lowered the radio and sighed. That meant she was on her own longer than she'd hoped. The kit made a tiny noise, more breath than sound. Brooke crouched and touched the small wound on its leg, assessing the damage. Not deep. A grazing bite. The real danger was fear. Animals this young could run themselves into exhaustion, choose the wrong hiding spot, or freeze at the worst possible moment. "You hang in there," she said gently. "We'll figure this out." The bobcat blinked up at her, trusting her the way only the lost could. A sudden rustle snapped Brooke's head up. She froze, her body shifting into instinctive alertness. The kit stiffened, ears twitching. Something moved in the brush to the left. Soft, deliberate steps. She rose slowly, one hand resting on the flare at her belt. A shadow slipped between the trees. Brooke narrowed her eyes. A coyote. Alone, it stood still, watching her with a kind of eerie patience, as if waiting to see whether she'd notice something it already knew. Its ears swiveled, listening. When Brooke took one step forward, it stepped back, silent, controlled, then melted into the underbrush. Her breath tightened. "They're not done," she murmured. She scanned the terrain again. The coyote hadn't approached for a kill. It had approached like a scout. A warning prickled down her spine. She went back to searching the ground, more urgently now. The forest began to slope downward into a narrow ravine where rain runoffs left soft patches perfect for tracking. She knelt, brushing aside dry needles, and suddenly her fingers found an indentation deeper than the others. A bobcat track. Adult. Clear. Recent. Brooke's pulse quickened. Okay. That's something. The kit hurried forward, sniffing the track, then let out a squeak that cut straight through Brooke. It recognized the scent. She could see it in the way its tail quivered, the way its body leaned toward the ravine. Brooke stood and followed the faint trail. But after a few steps, it veered into brush so thick she had to push branches aside. When she emerged on the other side, the tracks faded abruptly. She searched left. Nothing. Right. Nothing. A few feet ahead. Nothing. The trail had vanished. Just stopped. Brooke stared at the ground as if willing the earth to tell its story. The quiet pressed in around her, thick and unhelpful. The kit mewled again, this time softer, as though it understood what the missing tracks meant. Brooke knelt and lifted the small creature into her arms. It was warm, trembling, clinging to the sleeve of her jacket, with its claws barely extended. She held it close, letting its heartbeat press against her chest. She didn't move for a moment, just listened to the forest breathe around them. "All right," she whispered. "If the land won't tell me what happened." She looked toward the thickening trees, shadows layered like unanswered questions. "Then we'll find the answers ourselves." She carried the kit back to the jeep, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle over her like another layer of the forest's silence. She set the kit gently on the seat again, and it pressed against her side as she buckled in. Brooke gripped the wheel, scanning the woods one last time before starting the engine. The forest had given her nothing. No blood, no signs of struggle, no mother. Just a trembling kit and a widening mystery, and the uneasy knowledge that somewhere behind them, the coyotes were still watching. Brooke kept the jeep rolling at a slow crawl, eyes flicking between the path ahead and the side mirrors. Every few minutes, she caught a flash of movement, an ear, a tail, a shifting silhouette slipping between the trees. The coyotes were trailing them with the discipline of practiced hunters. They kept just enough distance to avoid provoking her, but not enough to lose sight of the kit. They moved like a shadow the forest itself had grown. The little bobcat pressed against her hip again, its body trembling less now, but its eyes still wide with the kind of fear young animals never forget. It wasn't just scared of the coyotes. It was searching for something that should have been here. A scent, a sound, a shape larger than life. Its mother. Brooke swallowed the heaviness gathering in her chest and leaned forward, studying the ground ahead. The forest opened into a wider section of pine, where the soil was softer and tracks tended to linger longer before wind erased them. She slowed, then stopped the jeep altogether. "Let's check here," she murmured. She stepped out, the kit following at her heel, as if the space between them might swallow it whole. The air smelled different in this stretch: damp earth, old sap, and something else faint but unmistakable. Brooke crouched and brushed her fingers across the ground. Tracks. Clear, deep, fresher than anything she'd seen so far. Adult bobcat. Full stride. Weight distributed normally. No sign of injury. The kit chirped, then stepped onto one of the prints, its tiny paw fitting neatly inside its mother's mark. Brooke's breath hitched. She looked up, following the line of tracks deeper into the forest. They were spaced evenly, heading north, almost too perfect. "Is this her?" Brooke whispered. "Were you headed this way?" The kit mewled softly, its tail flicking in quick, anxious motions. Brooke stood and walked ahead several paces, tracing the line of prints. They continued into a small dip in the terrain, then curved sharply around a cluster of stones. "Okay," she murmured. "That's something. Maybe she was moving fast. Maybe she was trying to hide you." She tried to convince herself, but something tightened in the back of her mind. Something about the trail felt staged. Not wrong exactly, but rehearsed. Adult predators often looped trails to mask their direction, but bobcats rarely repeated steps with such steady rhythm. This line looked almost deliberate. Still, she followed. The kit hurried beside her, stumbling occasionally on uneven ground. When it lost balance, it'd bump into her boot, then shake itself and keep going. Brooke kept one hand low, not touching, but close enough that the kit felt her presence. The forest thickened, the canopy blocking more of the sun, turning the light a muted green. A breeze whispered over the needles and died abruptly, as though the wind itself hesitated here. The trail led them past a fallen log, then up a small rise where the soil turned sandy. Brooke stopped again. More prints, even clearer. Bobcat adult. No drag marks. No signs of distress. "Someone was definitely here," she said aloud, half to the kit, half to steady her own doubts. The kit sniffed the tracks urgently, then let out a small chirp that sounded suspiciously like relief. It began hopping forward, following the path with sudden energy. Brooke followed, glancing occasionally toward the trees. A flicker of pale gray fur confirmed what she feared. The coyotes were still there. They were following the exact same trail, from both ends. Brooke stopped, frowning. She knelt beside another print, deeper than the last. Something felt off. She reached out and touched the indentation. Warm. Too warm. As if something had stepped there just minutes ago. She rose to her feet, senses sharpening. The back of her neck prickled. She scanned the forest, listening for anything out of place. Nothing. Then something. A rustle. The soft crunch of paws not far behind them. She turned sharply. A coyote stood just beyond a stand of brush, watching her with careful stillness. Its head lowered a fraction, but it didn't retreat. Its posture wasn't aggressive. It was suggestive. Like it wanted her to follow something, or keep following what she already was. Brooke narrowed her eyes. "You're not just trailing us," she whispered. "You're hurting us." The coyote blinked once, slowly, then melted into the trees. Brooke's pulse quickened. Coyotes rarely wasted energy. If they wanted the kit dead, they would have rushed earlier, but instead, they were positioning themselves, one behind, one to the left, two somewhere deeper ahead if her instincts were right. They were guiding her, down a path they wanted her to take, and they were using the mother's trail, too perfect, too clean, to keep her on that path. She took a slow breath, letting the realization settle like a weight in her chest. "Okay," she whispered. "They want us to think this is her." The kit looked up at her, blinking innocently, unaware of the layers unfolding around them. Brooke crouched and touched its back gently. "We're not done here, but I'm not rushing in blind." She moved ahead again, this time slower, more deliberate. The tracks curved again, looping toward a section of the forest where the trees grew close together. The air felt heavier, the light dimmer. The kit hesitated for the first time, ears flicking uncertainly. Brooke noted that. "That's odd," she murmured. "This should be comforting for you, not frightening." The kit backed up a step, sniffing the air. Its tail puffed slightly, trembling. A warning. Brooke straightened, scanning the brush. She moved forward carefully, stepping over a patch of moss. That's when she saw it, caught in a tangle of roots near the base of a pine. A single bobcat hair. Not fresh, not shed from grooming. Pulled. Caught at an odd angle. Brooke felt her stomach tighten. The truth was beginning to rise from the soil. She followed the trail another 10 yards. The perfect tracks continued, but behind them the forest seemed wrong. Too quiet. Too still. The way it gets before a storm or a hunt. The kit made a soft, uneasy sound, nudging her leg. "I know," Brooke whispered. "I'm starting to think this isn't where she went." But the tracks said otherwise. The forest said otherwise. The coyotes waiting in the shadows said otherwise. And the truth settled in her chest with a cold, sinking clarity. The trail that looked right, the trail she had hoped was the mother's, was leading them somewhere she wasn't sure she wanted to go. But turning back now wasn't an option. Not with the kit watching her. Not with the coyotes waiting for her to choose wrong. Not with a mother somewhere, hurt, trapped, or worse, depending on the choice she made next. Brooke tightened her grip on her flare gun and exhaled. "All right," she whispered. "Let's see where this goes." And she stepped deeper into the forest, toward the wrong trail that looked right. The woods closed around them, the light thinning into narrow stripes between the pine trunks. The farther Brooke went, the more the air felt charged, as if the forest were holding its breath. The little bobcat kept brushing against her boot, stumbling occasionally, but refusing to fall behind. Its trust was absolute, innocent, and painfully heavy on her shoulders. Brooke kept her flare gun ready, scanning every shadow for movement. The trail beneath her feet remained disturbingly perfect. Fresh adult bobcat tracks spaced evenly, as though the animal had been walking calmly rather than fleeing. No hesitation in the stride, no stagger, no dragging limb. "None of this makes sense," Brooke whispered. The kit chirped softly at the sound of her voice, then pressed closer. A shape flickered to her left. Brooke snapped her head toward it, muscles coiling. Coyote. It stood halfway behind a juniper bush, tail low, posture neutral but alert. When Brooke locked eyes with it, the animal didn't bolt. It simply tilted its head, as if listening to something deeper in the forest. Then, soundlessly, it turned and disappeared behind the trunk of a ponderosa pine. Brooke felt a cold ripple move down her spine. They were guiding her. The trail dipped downward toward a slight ravine where the canopy knitted tighter overhead. Brooke moved cautiously, boots sinking into softer soil. Each step left a clear print. That was when she noticed something strange. Her own tracks were the only human footprints here. No signs of hunters. No ATV tracks. No animal struggling with an injury. Just the neat, clean bobcat trail. Too clean. The kit stiffened suddenly. Its tiny ears perked, swiveling left, then right. It let out a trembling chirp that held more fear than hope. "What is it?" Brooke knelt beside it. The kit didn't look at her. Instead, it stared ahead, eyes wide, pupils blown large. Brooke followed its gaze. The trail curved sharply around a moss-covered boulder and into an area thick with ferns and undergrowth. Movement. Not fast, not loud, just a steady, ghost-like pacing. Brooke inhaled slowly. "Okay, we're not alone." She straightened, lifted her radio, and pressed the button. "Base, this is Harris checking in. Still tracking. No sign of the mother. But we've got coyote movement on both sides. They're coordinated. Too coordinated." Static swallowed her words. Then a faint voice broke through. "Copy. Try to keep. Signal weak. Vet team delayed." The transmission cut out. Brooke clipped the radio back, frustration tightening in her chest. She was deep enough now that signal fade was expected, but inconvenient wasn't even close to the right word. She was effectively alone out here. Well, not entirely alone. A low whine pulled her attention back to the kit. Its small body trembled again, but not the same way it had earlier. This tremor was sharper, instinct recognizing danger before Brooke could name it. "All right," she murmured. "Let's take this slow." She eased forward, pushing aside fern leaves. The ground dipped slightly, and the sunlight hit the tracks at just the right angle for her to see what she'd missed earlier. There were two sets of adult bobcat prints, one older, deeper indentation with a normal stride, and another, fainter, but matching it perfectly, laid over the top. Brooke blinked. "That's impossible," she whispered. No bobcat walked the same trail twice with that level of precision. They were nimble, unpredictable, and fast. Their trails were scattered with small variations. This wasn't a trail, it was a pattern. Something rustled behind them. Brooke spun. Another coyote stepped into view. This one older, with a notched ear and a grizzled coat. Its eyes were dark, steady, unblinking. Brooke raised the flare gun. The coyote stopped, not afraid, not aggressive, just observing. And then a second appeared, then a third. They positioned themselves evenly, matching each other's spacing without a sound. A formation. Brooke felt her breath catch. "They're trying to box us in." The kit shrank into the shadow of her boot, its tiny claws digging into the earth. Brooke fired the flare into the ground between her and the nearest coyote. The burst of brilliant red hissed violently, scattering sparks. The coyotes flinched, stepping back a few feet, but none ran. They simply widened their spacing, adjusting the perimeter. They didn't need to charge. They were shaping the path she walked. She realized it then. They were funneling her toward something. Brooke grabbed the kit and backed toward a rock ledge. The coyotes shifted with her, maintaining distance, keeping the loop intact. She tried to count them. 1, 2, 3. A fourth shadow moved silently between shrubs. A fifth she'd seen earlier. Too many for coincidence. Brooke's heartbeat drummed hard in her ears. Coyotes weren't mindless scavengers. They were strategists. And a coordinated funnel meant one thing. They believed something was waiting up ahead. Something they wanted her to stumble into. Something dangerous enough that even they didn't want to confront it directly. She whispered, "They're not following us. They're pushing us." The kit made a broken, pleading sound. Brooke scooped it up, cradling its trembling body against her chest. Its heart hammered wildly, fluttering like a trapped bird. She felt its ribs lifting in frantic, rapid motions. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've got you." But she wasn't sure she believed her own words. Brooke turned her focus back to the trail. The clean prints continued, leading into a narrow channel between two massive boulders. Beyond that, the forest darkened into a corridor of tightly clustered pines, exactly the kind of place an ambush might wait. She hesitated. Then, a sudden buzz broke through the canopy overhead. Brooke's breath left her in a rush. A drone. She stepped into the open so the signal could catch. The drone dipped lower, its small frame silhouetted against the sun. A voice crackled from her radio, startling her. "Harris, it's Liam. Drone's overhead." Relief washed through her, warm enough to ease the tightness in her chest. "I see it," she said. "Good timing." "Yeah, well, you're not going to like what I'm seeing from up here." Brooke's grip tightened around the kit. "Tell me." "The coyotes aren't just following you," Liam said, voice low, tense. 2 just moved ahead of your position. 4 are spacing behind you. Brooke's pulse jumped. "They're cutting off escape." "Exactly. And Harris, what you're following..." He paused. Brooke's stomach dropped. "That trail isn't clean because it's fresh." Brooke's voice was barely above a whisper. "Then why?" "Because something walked it twice," Liam said. "Once fast, once careful, almost like someone wanted it to look recent." "Yeah." Brooke stared at the neat prints, suddenly seeing them not as signs of the mother's path, but as careful illusions. The wrongness that had whispered earlier now shouted. The forest held its breath again. The kit whimpered. Brooke lifted her gaze toward the dark pine corridor ahead. Whatever waited there, it wasn't a mother searching for her young. And the coyotes behind her, they already knew it. Brooke stood still for a long moment, the kit trembling in her arms, the drone humming like a nervous insect above the pines. The air had changed, gone tight, gone thin, like the forest itself was waiting to see if she'd step into the trap. She could feel the eyes of the coyotes on her back, could feel the kit's heartbeat thudding against her chest. Every instinct she had was telling her the same thing. Move carefully, move slow, and whatever you do, don't trust the direction the land seems to pull you. "Harris," Liam said through the radio, voice low, "don't go straight in. Something's off in that corridor." "I know," she murmured. She adjusted her grip on the kit and took a single step forward, letting her boots brush lightly over the ground. The opening between the pines wasn't wide, just enough space for one person to walk through at a time. The shadows draped over the earth like curtains concealing an unseen stage. The kit stiffened suddenly. Its tiny ears sprang upright. Its breath hitched. Its body went rigid against her chest. "What is it?" Brooke whispered. It didn't look at her. It stared straight ahead, past the pine trunks, toward the deeper dark. A soft, uncertain chirp rose from its throat. Confused, desperate, hopeful all at once. Brooke followed its gaze. At first, she saw nothing, just layers of trees and tangled brush. Then something shifted. A silhouette moved between the shadows. Low, graceful, feline. Brooke's breath caught. A bobcat. Adult. Female by the size and shape of the body. The kit let out a sudden frantic sound, struggling in her arms. It reached out its little paws toward the figure, claws barely extending in longing. It knew that silhouette. Every inch of its tiny frame reached toward the form emerging from the dark. "Oh God," Brooke breathed. "Is that her?" The adult bobcat stepped out enough for the sunlight to fall on its coat. Tawny, healthy, strong. Its eyes gleamed amber, fixed sharply on the kit, and on Brooke. Liam's voice crackled over the radio. "Harris, I'm getting eyes on something. Is that the mother?" "I don't know yet," Brooke whispered. But the kit thought so. It wriggled harder, letting out a cry that was almost joyful, almost relieved. Brooke loosened her grip, letting it drop gently to the ground. The kit stumbled as it landed, then righted itself, tail twitching with excitement. It chirped 3 times, short, high-pitched calls meant only for one listener in the world. The adult bobcat didn't move. Not forward, not backward, not even a twitch. Its ears flattened slightly. Its body stiffened. Its head lowered in a way Brooke recognized instantly. Not curiosity. Warning. "Easy," Brooke whispered, though the forest wasn't listening. The kit took another step forward, faster this time, its little legs scrambling over the soft earth. It chirped again, louder, urgent, pleading. That was when the adult bobcat snarled. The sound exploded across the narrow corridor, raw, sharp, violent. It wasn't the snarl of a mother reunited with her lost young. It was the snarl of a territorial predator confronting an intruder. The kit skidded to a stop. Its ears dropped. Its tail shrank in fear. "Brooke," Liam said sharply, "back the kit off! Get it away!" But Brooke was already moving. She lunged forward and scooped the kit up just as the adult bobcat lunged. A blur of muscle and claws slashed the air where the kit had been a heartbeat before. Brooke stumbled back, clutching the kit protectively against her chest. The adult bobcat stopped short of her, hissing, teeth bared, body crouched low in a challenge that sent cold fear slicing through the clearing. "That's not the mother," Brooke said softly. "That's not her at all." The kit didn't scream. It didn't thrash. It just cried. A soft, broken sound that didn't belong in a world this hard. The adult bobcat took another step forward, ears pinned tight. It wasn't confused. It wasn't curious. It was defending its territory. From the kit, not from Brooke. "Harris," Liam said, "get out of there. Now." Brooke stepped back slowly, never turning her back on the adult. It followed with its eyes, snarling again, making it clear that one step too far would trigger an attack. She kept moving, inch by inch, the kit trembling violently in her arms. The forest behind her rustled. A soft laugh rose from the brush. "Coyote." Then another. Then another. Brooke's blood ran cold. The coyotes were spreading out, forming another semicircle behind her, waiting for a mistake, a stumble, a distraction. They had planned this. They had known exactly where she would end up. They had known the trail was wrong. She was surrounded again. Bobcat in front, coyotes behind, forest closing in on every side. The adult bobcat hissed once more, then vanished back into the shadows, leaving the clearing as suddenly as it had appeared. The kit pressed its face into Brooke's jacket, no longer hopeful, no longer reaching, just small and lost and shaking. Brooke backed away until she had enough ground to turn without exposing her back to the predators. She didn't look away until she reached open territory where the light fell stronger. Only then did she breathe. "That wasn't her," she whispered. Liam's voice came through, softer now. "Then, where is the real mother?" Brooke looked down at the kit, its tiny paws gripping her sleeve like it was holding on to the last thread of the world it understood. "I don't know," she said, "but the wrong trail almost got us killed." She lifted her gaze toward the deeper woods, the parts untouched, unmarked, and unexplained. "We're finding another way. The real trail must be out there somewhere." But as she turned toward the untracked ground, she felt the weight of the kit against her heartbeat, heard the coyotes' distant laughter rise again, and understood the truth. The forest wasn't finished with them yet. Brooke steadied her breath and stepped away from the corridor where the wrong trail had lured her. She could still feel the echo of that adult bobcat's snarl vibrating in her bones, a sound of warning, not welcome. The kit's small body trembled against her chest, its earlier hope drained into something quieter, more wounded. It buried its face in her jacket as though the world outside had become too sharp to face. "Easy," she whispered into its fur. "We'll find the right path." But the right path was nowhere visible. The forest opened ahead of her into a broad, scattered stretch of pines. No clean footprints, no broken branches, no dragging marks. Nothing but a carpet of fallen needles stretching outward like a muted, endless sea. The kind of terrain where truth hid easily and predators moved like ghosts. The coyotes knew this land better than she did. That was the part that bothered her most. The drone buzzed overhead, shifting its angle. Liam's voice returned, steadier now, though tinged with unease. "Harris, you clear of that adult bobcat?" "For now," Brooke said. "She wasn't the one we needed." So the kit didn't recognize her. Brooke looked down. The little bobcat clung to her shirt, not even trying to stand on its own. "No," she said softly. "Not even close." The radio crackled. "Then the mother is still out there somewhere. And whatever happened, it wasn't recent." Brooke swallowed, letting that truth settle like a stone inside her. "Give me thermal," she said. "Already on it." The drone's hum shifted as its camera recalibrated. Brooke watched the tiny screen clipped to her vest. Heat signatures glowed in the grayscale world, her own shape, the small, bright glow of the kit, and a cluster of cooler shapes moving deliberately along the northern tree line. Coyotes. 6 of them. "They're spreading," Liam said, "trying to widen the pressure." "They're circling," Brooke murmured, "still waiting for us to pick the wrong direction." The forest creaked as a breeze passed through the high branches. The kit whimpered, sensing the shift. Brooke set it gently on the ground. Its legs wobbled but held. It pressed itself against her boot, leaning into her shadow like an anchor. "All right," she whispered. "Let's try this again." She crouched, brushing aside a layer of needles. The soil beneath was uneven, littered with acorn caps and tiny stones. She looked for anything out of place. A bent twig, a tuft of fur, a faint track. Nothing. She moved farther, scanning the ground with the patience born from years of tracking wounded animals. Her fingertips skimmed the earth, reading it like a story. The kit followed her silently, sometimes stepping so close that its whiskers brushed her jeans. A yard ahead, she paused. Something faint caught the corner of her eye, barely a suggestion of a path. Not a clear line, not a fresh imprint. Just a subtle disturbance beneath the needles, almost invisible unless someone was searching for it. Her breath tightened. "Liam, I think I found something." The drone hovered lower. The screen showed it clearly now. One faint indentation, then another, unevenly spaced, like a creature that wasn't walking with full strength. The kit's ears perked. It stepped forward, nose twitching rapidly. Then it stopped, frozen, as if the scent rising from the disturbed needles reached deep inside its memory. A soft sound escaped its throat. Not fear, not confusion. Recognition. Brooke's chest tightened. "You know this scent, don't you?" The kit chirped again, higher now, urgent but trembling. It took another step forward, then looked back at Brooke, as though begging her to follow. She nodded. "Lead the way, little one." The kit moved ahead, slower than a healthy bobcat, but with a certainty that hadn't been there before. It traced the faint, uneven impressions across the earth. Brooke followed close behind, her eyes scanning every inch of shadow around them. The trail dipped into a shallow decline. A fallen pine lay across the path, forcing the kit to hop awkwardly over a low branch. Brooke steadied it with her hand as it stumbled. "You're doing good," she whispered. The kit kept going. The forest grew darker here. The canopy overhead thickened, interlocking in tangled patterns that blocked out most of the sun. The air cooled. Somewhere to her right, a woodpecker hammered at dead bark, its rhythmic tapping echoing like a distant heartbeat. But beneath that noise, Brooke heard something else, the subtle shuffle of paws in the underbrush. She didn't turn. She didn't stop. She simply kept moving, trusting the kit's fragile certainty more than the trail itself. Then, another print. Clearer this time. Adult bobcat. Deeper on one side, lighter on the other. Brooke knelt beside it. "Injury," she murmured. Weight shifting to the front leg, back leg dragging slightly. The kit sniffed the track. Its whole little body shivered, but not with fear. With something deeper. Hope. Brooke rose and scanned the terrain ahead. The faint trail curved right, then vanished again beneath a thick blanket of needles. But the kit didn't pause this time. It veered sharply toward a cluster of large rocks, its steps uneven but determined. Liam's voice returned. "I'm seeing movement on thermal, northwest side. Slow, cold signature. Might be injured." Brooke's pulse quickened. "Human? No. Too small and too low to the ground. Might be her." The kit let out a sharp chirp, a call filled with urgency. Then it broke into a shaky trot. Brooke followed, keeping pace. "Liam, keep eyes on those coyotes." "They're shifting again," he said. "4 behind you, 2 ahead. Looks like they're trying to predict your route." Of course they were. Predators knew the wounded always returned to the weakest point. They could smell the end long before anyone else could. Brooke climbed the slight incline behind the kit. Her breath shortened as her boots dug into loose dirt. The kit scrambled up the last few feet and disappeared briefly behind a downed log. "Hold on, wait," Brooke called softly. When she reached the top, she saw it. A tuft of fur caught on a jagged stone. Tawny, thick, bobcat. Then, another print. Fresh this time, unmistakable, the edges still crisp where the soil had compressed. The kit chirped, louder, heart-wrenching. Brooke placed her hand gently on its back. "We're close." The forest around them creaked. A low wind moved through the pines like a whisper. Then, from deep ahead, just faint enough to doubt, a sound carried through the trees. A soft, strained exhale. Barely a breath. Barely alive. The kit gasped, a high, broken sound, and surged forward with more strength than Brooke had seen in it all day. Brooke followed, pulse hammering, knowing the truth as surely as the kit did. This wasn't the wrong trail, not anymore. This faint, fragile whisper beneath the pine needles, was the real one. And at the end of it, somewhere just beyond the next line of trees, lay the answer they had been searching for. Brooke pushed through the thinning pines, her breath tightening as the forest opened into a small hollow. The air shifted here, cooler, heavier, like the land was bracing itself for what lay ahead. The kit scrambled forward, tripping over its own paws, driven by something deeper than instinct alone. Its small cries echoed off the trees, uneven and urgent, pulling Brooke faster and faster across the soft, needle-covered ground. Then she saw it. A tree had fallen long ago, its white bark weathered to a pale silver. The trunk lay at an angle across a shallow depression in the earth, its wide limbs splayed like broken ribs. For a moment, Brooke didn't understand what she was seeing beneath it. The shape blended so naturally into the earth that it seemed like part of the landscape. Still, quiet, almost peaceful. Until the kit gave a sharp, heartbreaking cry. That was when Brooke understood. A bobcat, adult, female, half covered by the fallen limbs, pressed into the dirt where she had collapsed. The breath left Brooke's lungs. Oh no. The kit sprinted the last few feet, launching itself at the still form. It pressed its tiny face against the adult's cheek, nudging again and again, desperate, frantic, begging. Its chirps turned into thin wails, each one sharper than the last. Brooke knelt beside them. The mother's body was warm, but not warm enough. Her chest rose in shallow, uneven movements, each breath like it had to be fought for. Her coat, once sleek, was matted with dust and sweat, and her leg, Brooke's stomach twisted, was grotesquely swollen, twice its normal size, the fur patched with dried blood. "Easy," Brooke whispered, though the words were swallowed by the hush of the forest. "I've got you now. Both of you." She slid her hands beneath the fallen limb nearest the cat's flank. It was heavy, too heavy for the mother to move on her own. The ground around her was churned in wide arcs, claw marks gouged into the dirt where she had struggled, fought, dragged herself, trying to escape the snare knotted around her hind leg. Brooke's heart tightened painfully. A snare. Illegal. Steel cable pulled so tight it cut into the flesh. Predators weren't the only danger in this part of the forest. The mother let out a low, strained groan as Brooke lifted the branch enough to ease the pressure on her ribs. Her eyes cracked open, clouded, unfocused, barely there. For a second, a faint sound rattled in her chest. The kit responded instantly, crying louder, pushing its face into hers as if to hold her spirit in place. "It's okay," Brooke murmured. "She hears you." The mother's eyes drifted to the kit. Something flickered there. Not quite recognition, not quite awareness, but something ancient inside her still responded. She tried to lift her head, but the motion sent a wave of pain through her body so sharp that she let out a deep, guttural exhale. Brooke reached for her radio with trembling fingers. "Base, this is Harris. I've found her. Adult female bobcat. Severe injury. She's down. Snare wound. Significant swelling. She's alive, but barely. I need the vet team here now." Static broke the air. Then the dispatcher's voice rattled and urgent. "Sending coordinates to the team immediately. Hold your position. They're mobilizing." Brooke lowered the radio, steeling herself. The forest around them was too quiet. No birdsong, no wind. Nothing but a tension so complete it felt like the land itself knew what waited in the shadows. A faint rustle drifted through the underbrush. Brooke lifted her head sharply. Not wind, not deer. Coyotes. They emerged like gray phantoms from the tree line, their silhouettes sliding between shadows. 6 of them, maybe more now, moving with the same calculated patience as before. They didn't rush. They didn't charge. They simply sat back on their haunches, eyes fixed on the fallen mother. Waiting. Brooke felt cold travel down her spine. "Not today," she whispered. "Not like this." She stepped fully in front of the mother and Kit, planting her boots in the dirt. Her hand hovered near the flare gun. The closest coyote, An older male with a torn ear tilted his head, letting his tongue flick lightly over his teeth. He didn't look hungry. He looked certain. The kit began to cry louder, desperately nudging its mother's face. The sound cut straight through the stillness, fragile and furious, like a tiny heartbeat trying to pull its parent back from the edge. Brooke crouched again, moving slowly so she wouldn't startle either animal. She touched the mother's flank gently. The skin beneath her fingers was hot, too hot. The infection had spread fast, likely for days. The cable had been tightened repeatedly, fighting every attempt the bobcat made to free herself until the limbs swelled grotesquely around the metal. Brooke pressed a hand lightly around the wound. The mother flinched, a soft, broken movement, but a movement nonetheless. "You're a fighter," Brooke whispered. "You held on for her. Now hold on for us." The kit curled into its mother's side, heartbreakingly small against her large, weakened frame. Brooke felt the weight of their bond, the invisible thread tying them together, even as the mother's breathing grew shallower. Liam's voice cracked through the radio again, more urgent now. "Harris, I'm picking up the Coyotes on thermal. They're closing in. You need to keep them back. The vet team is still 20 minutes out." Brooke glanced around. The Coyotes fanned out, creating a half circle around the hollow. They didn't make a sound. They didn't move. They didn't need to. Their stillness said everything. They were waiting for Washer to finish what the snare had started. Brooke positioned herself between them and the cats, lifting her flare gun slightly. "You're not getting through me," she whispered. A low growl rolled from the brush behind her. Another coyote. Brooke's pulse hammered hot behind her ribs, but she stayed still. Too much movement would trigger the pack. Too little would embolden them. She stood tall, shoulders squared, legs firm. The kit cried again, quieter this time, a small sound that felt like a crack in the world. Brooke swallowed hard. She knelt and gently touched the mother's face, brushing away the dirt gathered around her eyes. "Help is coming," she whispered. "You hold on. For her." The mother blinked slowly. Her gaze shifted, not to Brooke, not to the kit, but to something far away, as if she were drifting between worlds. Brooke stayed with her, one hand on her shoulder. The kit pressed tightly to her side. The forest stayed silent. The coyotes stayed waiting. The mother stayed breathing, barely. And Brooke, surrounded by predators and a dying mother fighting her last battle, held the line. The hollow had become a kind of suspended world, quiet, tense, and painfully fragile. Every breath the mother bobcat drew was thinner than the one before it, her chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged waves. The kit clung to her, pressing its tiny face into the fur along her neck in desperate attempts to wake something in her, to pull her back from the place she was slipping into. Brooke knelt beside them, her hands steady but her pulse pulsing hot beneath her skin. She placed 2 fingers lightly against the swollen leg again, feeling the fever radiating from the wound. The snare still cut deep into the flesh, metal glinting beneath mats of dried blood. The swelling had grown so severe that the skin around it stretched unnaturally tight. "You've been fighting this for a long time," Brooke murmured. "Way too long." The mother's ear twitched weakly, not enough to signal strength, just enough to tell Brooke she wasn't gone yet. A soft crack sounded from behind her. Brooke turned slightly, just enough to see shadows shifting through the trees. Coyotes. Their silhouettes were clearer now, no longer hiding in half-shadow. They wanted her to see them, wanted her to know they were waiting. The torn-ear male stepped forward a few feet, lowering his head in a calm, confident posture that made Brooke's stomach clench. He could smell the infection. He could smell weakness. He could smell the end coming. Brooke rose to her feet and fired a flare into the ground near the pack. The burst of red light hissed loud and violent. Sparks spat across the dry needles. The coyotes flinched, backing away several yards, but not fleeing entirely. They adjusted their formation instead, spreading wider, ensuring no escape route existed, watching with that eerie, calculating patience. Liam's voice crackled through the radio. "Harris, vet team is 10 minutes out. Maybe less. They're pushing hard." Brooke exhaled. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. "We're boxed in," she said quietly. "Coyotes forming a full semicircle now. They know she's down. Can you keep them back?" "I'll have to." Another cry burst from the kit. This one raw, frantic. It pawed at its mother's shoulder, then pressed its whole tiny body against her side as if trying to hold her together. The mother stirred faintly at the pressure, letting out a low, aching rumble that vibrated through the ground. Brooke crouched again. "Stay with her. Just stay with her." She slid her pack off her shoulder and pulled out her trauma shears. The blades gleamed in the thin light. She touched the snare gently, assessing the tension. The metal was embedded deep, far deeper than she first thought. Removing it wrong could cause her to bleed out. Leaving it was worse. The infection was already spreading up her leg. "Liam," she said softly, "I'm going to try to cut the snare." "Be careful," he replied. "You know what happens if that leg bleeds." "I know." She slipped the shears beneath the twisted cable, angling them carefully so she wouldn't tear more tissue. The mother groaned, low, pained, trembling. The kit cried harder, trying to climb over Brooke's arm. Brooke gently pushed it back with her elbow. "It's okay. I'm helping her, I swear." The coyotes watched the scene intently. One of them paced at the edge of the hollow, circling in slow arcs like a shadow tracing its own shape. The torn-ear male lay down, resting his head on his paws, as if settling in for a weight he already believed was short. Brooke tightened her grip on the shears. "Okay, here we go." She cut through the first section of cable. The tension snapped with a metallic twang, the sound echoing unnervingly loud in the hushed clearing. The mother twitched violently at the release, her claws scraping uselessly against the dirt. "It's all right," Brooke soothed. "Almost there." She worked the shears around the underside of the cable. Sweat began to run down the back of her neck. The flare smoldered a few feet away, sending thin trails of smoke upward. The heat of the mother's leg radiated like a small fire. One more cut. Just one. The cable snapped free. The mother released a sound Brooke would never forget, something between a groan and a whimper, thick with pain but also with a sliver of relief, like a weight lifted just enough to breathe again. The kit immediately pressed its face into her cheek, chirping rapidly, nudging, pleading. The mother blinked, slow, weak, but aware now, aware of her baby pressed against her. Brooke felt her throat tighten. "You're still in there," she whispered. The radio crackled again, more urgent. "Harris, vet team is 5 minutes out. Keep her stable. Keep those coyotes off." "Working on it." Another rustle swept through the brush. 2 coyotes emerged on the opposite side of the hollow. Their bodies were low, tails stiff, ears angled forward in hungry attention. They weren't waiting for Brooke anymore. They were watching the mother, watching her weakness. Brooke fired another flare, this time into the center of the pack. The burst of red splashed against the earth like a firework in miniature. The coyotes scattered backward, yelping at the sudden heat. But again, they didn't leave. They regrouped deeper in the trees, forming the outer wall of the trap they'd been shaping since dawn. "Persistent," Brooke muttered. "Too persistent." The mother's breathing hitched again, sending a tremor through her entire body. Brooke moved fast, checking the wound. Beneath the swelling, something pulsed wrong. The infection was so advanced, the flesh had begun to discolor. She needed help, real help, medication, Fluids, incision, drainage. 5 minutes might as well have been a lifetime. The kit's cries softened, turning into small, rhythmic chirps meant to soothe its mother the way she once soothed it. Brooke looked at the pair, heartbreak and determination warring inside her. "You're not dying today," she whispered. "Not like this. Not with them watching." Leaves rustled sharply behind her. Brooke turned. 2 coyotes had crept in closer than before. Too close. Their eyes gleamed, fixed on the dying mother. One took a slow step forward, nose twitching as it scented the weakness in the air. Brooke rose to her full height, stepping between them and the mother. She raised her flare gun high. "Back!" The coyotes hesitated. Then one growled, a deep, resonant sound that rippled across Brooke's nerves. A sharp buzz cut through the air. The drone dipped low overhead, angling its camera directly at the pack. Liam's voice came through the radio, steadier now. "Hold them, Brooke. Vet team's on the ridge. 30 seconds. Brooke's heart leapt. She braced herself, legs solid, flare gun ready. The coyotes edged back again, sensing something changing in the air. Heavier footsteps, human voices, the growing presence of those who didn't fear them. Then, from beyond the rise, a vehicle engine roared. Light glinted off metal, doors slammed, voices shouted, and the coyotes, for the first time, backed away. Brooke let out a shaky breath. The mother bobcat was still alive. Barely, but alive. Time hadn't run out yet. Not while Brooke stood between life and the waiting teeth of the forest. Dr. Collins and his team came down the ridge fast, too fast for the rough terrain, but none of them slowed. Sarah, the veterinary nurse, was already pulling gloves on as she ran, her kit thumping against her hip. Another ranger carried a portable crate of medical supplies. They looked at Brooke first, then at the mother bobcat lying beneath the fallen aspen, and their faces shifted, professional urgency overtaking shock. "She's bad," Brooke said, voice tight. "Snare wound, severe swelling, infections traveling." Collins dropped to his knees beside the mother, his breath steadying as his training locked into place. He touched her flank gently, then pressed fingers along the edge of the swollen leg. The heat against his skin was intense. "How long has she been like this?" he asked. "She was still fighting the trap earlier," Brooke said, "but she's crashing." The kit mewled sharply, pressing itself against its mother's neck. Collins glanced at it, then back at Brooke. "You'll need to keep him restrained. He's going to panic once we start." Brooke nodded. "He already thinks we're hurting her." The coyotes lingered farther back now, scattered into the shadows, but their eyes glowed between the trunks, silent, hopeful, frustrated. They weren't gone, just waiting for the world to tilt in their favor again. Collins called out, "Let's stand her up if we can. I need her weight distributed. That swelling won't drain properly if she's down." Brooke's chest tightened. "Stand her? She can barely breathe." "No choice," Collins murmured. "If she stays down, the infection compresses the tissues more. This is her only shot." Sarah prepped an injection, her hands practiced and calm. "Sedative first. Just enough to ease pain, not enough to drop her deeper." Brooke knelt beside the kit, wrapping her arms around it as Sarah approached the mother. The needle slid in at the base of the ear. The mother twitched weakly, letting out a guttural rumble. The kit's entire body stiffened. Brooke held tighter. "Easy. They're helping her, I promise." The sedative took hold slowly. Collins signaled for Brooke and one of the rangers to help lift. The mother's body was heavy with weakness, her legs barely cooperating, but with 3 steadying hands and gentle leverage, they got her upright. She swayed violently, almost tipping. Brooke steadied her from one side, feeling the tremors vibrate through her palms. The kit cried, a soft, desperate whine that made Brooke's heart ache. Collins knelt quickly. "All right, I'm making the incision." He sliced into the swollen flesh, Thick, foul-smelling fluid spilled out, dark and cloudy, releasing pressure that had been tearing the tissue apart from the inside. Sarah gagged quietly, but kept working, flushing the wound, removing dead tissue, checking the depth of the infection. The mother bobcat let out a harsh, broken cry. The kit shrieked in response, high, wild, terrified. It thrashed, claws catching Brooke's jacket, desperately trying to get to its mother. "I know," Brooke whispered, voice cracking. "I know. She's fighting. She's still fighting." The mother's legs nearly buckled again. One ranger braced her shoulder. Brooke braced her chest. The bobcat's breath came out in short, strangled bursts. Collins worked faster. "She's septic, but if we can clear enough of this, she might rally." The kit's body trembled violently in Brooke's arms, its tiny cries becoming smaller, softer, pleading, confused, heartbroken. At one point it buried its face in her sleeve, unable to watch. Brooke felt tears burn behind her eyes. "Hold on," she whispered. "Hold on, Mama." Sarah snapped open a saline bag, squeezing out a harsh stream to wash the wound. The fluid carried away pus, clots, and remnants of infection. Collins cut deeper into the tissue to release more pressure. More drainage spilled out. Thick, dark, heavy with the weight of days spent suffering alone. The coyotes shifted again in the distance. Their soft, excited yips floated through the trees like laughter. They could sense the danger of the moment, the tipping point, the moment survival might slip. Brooke stood straighter, jaw tightening. "Stay back!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the pines. The pack scattered a few feet backward, but didn't leave. The torn-ear male remained still, eyes fixed on the swaying mother. "Brooke," Collins said, "one more flush. Keep her steady." Brooke pressed her shoulder to the mother's ribs, grounding her. "Come on," she whispered. "Stay here. Your baby needs you." Sarah flushed the wound again. More fluid poured out. Then, the mother's chest rose in a deeper breath. Not strong, but deeper. Her ears twitched. Her head lifted a fraction. Her pupils sharpened. Brooke felt it before she understood it. "She's stabilizing," Collins said, his voice rising with cautious hope. "She's actually stabilizing." The kit froze, then made a soft, shaking chirp, hope rekindling. The mother bobcat blinked, slow but aware now. Her gaze drifted downward, toward the kit pressed against Brooke's arms. The kit reached out a tiny paw, touching the air toward her. Something fragile passed between them. Recognition buried under pain, surfacing again. Brooke's throat tightened. "Come on, Mama," she whispered. "Stand for him. Just stand." Collins stepped back. "All right. Let's see if she can hold her own weight." Brooke eased her support a few inches away. The mother wobbled, violently, then steadied, her legs locked, her spine straightened slightly. She remained standing. Brooke let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Collins nodded once. "She's going to make it." The coyotes sensed the shift instantly. The torn-ear male rose, took one step forward, then stopped. His ears flicked, his tail lowered. The moment he realized the mother wasn't going to fall, not now, not today, he turned away. The others followed, slipping back into the darkness between the pines, their opportunity lost. Gone. Silent. Beaten by something stronger than hunger. Brooke held the kit close as it trembled with relief. The little creature pressed its head into her jacket, overwhelmed by the return of something it had thought was slipping away forever. Brooke touched the mother's cheek gently. "You did it," she whispered. "You're still here." The mother blinked once, slow, steady, alive. For the first time since Brooke had found them, the forest felt like it exhaled. Not all the way, never completely, but enough. Enough for hope to take its first full breath. The days that followed unfolded slowly, as if the forest itself were holding its breath for the small family beneath the fallen aspen. Brooke came back every morning, before the sun rose fully over the Kaibab rim, her jeep humming softly along the trail she'd carved by sheer repetition. Each time she arrived, she found the mother bobcat standing a little straighter, resting a little easier, breathing a little deeper. The infection, once a vicious fire crawling through her leg, eased under the medicine Dr. Collins left with Brooke. The swelling shrank, leaving wrinkled skin and a pale, healing line where the snare had cut so deep. Brooke cleaned the wound gently, always speaking softly, always moving slow. The mother never hissed or lashed out. She simply watched, weary but trusting, as if she understood that this strange human was part of the reason she was still alive. And the kit, once trembling, terrified, lost in the shadow of death, began to grow bold. At first it wouldn't leave its mother's side. It tucked itself into the curve of her chest, clinging to her warmth, flinching whenever the wind rustled wrong or a jay called too sharply. But as the days stretched into the first week, the kit peeked out cautiously whenever Brooke arrived. Then it stepped forward, one hesitant paw, then two, to sniff her boots. By the end of the second week, it greeted her with tiny chirps of recognition. By the third, it ran. Wobbly at first, clumsy on the pine needles, but running all the same. Straight toward Brooke, tail flicking, eyes bright with a joy so unguarded it almost hurt to look at. It circled her feet, batted at her shoelaces, tugged playfully on her pant leg, with little bursts of confidence that would have been unthinkable when she first found it alone and surrounded by coyotes. Each time it darted back to its mother afterward, checking, confirming, making sure she was still there. And she always was, standing beneath the same broad aspen, watching her young with a gaze that grew stronger each day. One afternoon, when the light drifted gold through the trees, Brooke arrived to find the mother standing beside the aspen stump with no bandage for the first time. The wound had closed fully, sealed by time, medicine, and the fierce stubbornness only wild creatures carried. She shifted her weight, smooth, steady, confident, no limp, no hesitation. Brooke felt something warm twist in her chest. "Look at you," she whispered. "Tough girl." The mother's ear flicked in her direction. Not fear, not warning, just acknowledgement. The kit, larger and stronger now, bounded toward Brooke on quick, eager paws. It skidded to a stop, then pressed its forehead into her leg, rubbing gently with a soft purr-like hum that made Brooke smile despite herself. She knelt, letting it curl its tiny trunk-like tail around her wrist. "You're going to be just fine out here." A rustle drifted through the trees. The mother bobcat stepped forward, slow, deliberate. She stopped a few feet from Brooke, her gaze steady and calm. Then she lowered her head, just a fraction, just enough for Brooke to understand. A thank you. A gesture wild animals almost never gave. A bridge between two worlds that rarely touched without fear. Brooke swallowed the lump in her throat. "You're welcome," she whispered, "both of you." A distant sound drifted across the forest then, one Brooke recognized at once. A long, rising bobcat yowl. Another answered it. Then another. A chorus, faint at first but growing clearer as it carried through the pines like a returning heartbeat. The kit froze. Its ears perked. Its body stilled. Its breath caught in a tiny, trembling gasp of recognition. Brooke rose slowly, turning toward the sound. Movement shimmered in the distance. A lean shape stepping from behind a cedar, then another and another. 3 bobcats, adults, moving with the quiet confidence of animals who knew every bend of the land. They paused, eyes narrowing as they studied the strange scene. A mother recovering, a kit standing proudly beside her, and a human who smelled of medicine and pine sap. The mother bobcat lifted her head and answered softly. The lead cat stepped closer, not threatening, just acknowledging. The kit glanced at Brooke, one last time. Its eyes were wide and full of something Brooke couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe. Fear. Or simply the ache of parting from the only safe shape it had known since its world fell apart. Brooke knelt again. "Go on," she said softly. "She's waiting." The kit hesitated a heartbeat longer, then released her hand and ran to its mother. The mother gathered it close with a sweeping curl of her neck. Together they turned toward the waiting trio and moved as one, slipping into the dappled light between the trees. Brooke watched until their shapes dissolved into the gold and green, the mother's tail swaying steady, the kit trotting close at her heel, the forest closing behind them like a curtain drawn over a story that had not ended, but shifted back into the world where it belonged. The wind moved gently through the pines, carrying with it the scent of earth and sap and something else, something like peace. Brooke let out a long breath. That was when she saw it. Half hidden in the dust near her boot, rusted and twisted, lay the snare. The same kind of steel that had nearly taken a mother's life. The same kind of trap she had found far too many times on this land. She crouched, touching it lightly. Cold metal, sharp edges, a reminder of the thin line between cruelty and survival. The forest around her grew still, as if holding a moment of its own. Brooke picked up the snare and slipped it into her vest pocket. "Not today," she said softly. "Not ever again." As she walked back toward her jeep, sunlight filtered through the branches in long, gentle beams. Somewhere in the distance, a bobcat yowled once more, a sound stronger than the ones before it. Alive. Together. Home. And high on the ridge, silhouetted by the last rays of the afternoon, a single coyote stood watching. Not approaching, not circling, just watching. Its eyes followed the direction the bobcats had gone, not with hunger this time, but with something quieter, something that carried no malice. The forest didn't belong to one life or one loss. It remembered everything, even kindness. Brooke paused and looked back at the ridge. The coyote held her gaze for a beat, then turned and slipped silently into the pines. The wind moved again, soft and warm, and somewhere deep in the forest, a baby bobcat found its family again. The wild had taken much, but today it had returned something. Before you go, I want to ask you something simple. Do you believe that little bobcat survived because a ranger refused to walk away? Or because the wild still remembers mercy when it sees it? Comment 0 if you think it was Brooke's courage. Comment 1 if you believe something deeper was at work out there. Your comment helps this story reach more people who care. And if you want more true-to-life rescues, quiet miracles, and moments that nearly slip away, make sure you subscribe. There are more stories waiting in the pines.